Looking to find harmony and work-life balance? Join Coach AnnaJo as she shares practical strategies, empowering mindsets, and inspiring stories to live the life you want to lead on AnnaJo Talks, Work Life for Badasses. Now, here's your host, Coach AnnaJo.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of AnnaJo Talks, Work Life for Badasses. I'm Coach AnnaJo, and I'm here to challenge the myth of balance and find real harmony in modern life. Today's episode, I have a special guest, one amazing woman, a visionary, a healthcare research and consultant leader, yes, a thought leader, and soon to be author, a true badass with amazing stories to share with you here today. Hello, Catarina Abreu. How are you, Catarina? Welcome.
I am doing great. Hello, hello. I am so excited to be here speaking with you. What an honor it is to be on your podcast.
I am so excited for you to be here as well. So excited. And for all our listeners, I want to introduce the bio. All right. So I'm reading to everybody know about you. So Catarina is a strategist and educator who demystifies AI, healthcare, and leadership for women in research who want more than just a safe career. Using her 12 plus year experience in healthcare research and consulting, Catarina helps women break free from their traditional path and become confident, mission driven thought leaders and entrepreneurs in the healthcare space. She is writing a book about the leadership lessons she learned from her own career and how they can be used to redefine success in a way that is empathetic and authentic. Born in Portugal, Catarina has lived in multiple countries before eventually moving to the United States. Right now, she lives in New York City. She holds a Bachelor of Science Economics from the University of Victoria and an MPH, all right, in Health Policy and Management from Columbia University. Yes, you have here right now a true badass. Catarina, hello again. My God, look at this bio. So, I'm just looking forward to go for the first question because I think everybody, after listening to your bio, wants to know more about your journey. Would you share with us?
Oh, my journey to get into healthcare research and consulting is very non-linear. And what people need to understand is that I grew up in multiple countries because my parents worked for the foreign services, the Portuguese foreign services. So I always have seen myself as Portuguese. And my mother was Portuguese American, so I grew up coming to the US. And this is going to come back into the story, I promise. So when I was younger, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mhm.
And we had to, at the time, fly to a different country for her to get care because we were living in a country that was experiencing a civil war. And that was when I started to really get interested in healthcare because I saw the difference in care that she received there. And then in the United States, where we moved to a few years later so that she could be closer to her family. Um, I knew from that point on, I wanted to do something that would help patients and improve their lives and their health, but I didn't know how because I did not want to become a doctor or a nurse or a psychologist or any type of clinician. And there's really no guidance or on how to achieve like non-traditional career paths. You kind of have to figure it out on your own, and that was what I did. So fast forward to several years later, I end up with a degree in economics and I am in Canada and I decide, you know what? Now would be an excellent time for me to try to move to the US and achieve the American dream because I grew up hearing about it from my family, my parents, my cousins in the US, American TV and media. We all know the American dream, right? You come to a different country, you come to the US, and no matter who you are, you achieve the dreams that you have a shot, you get a fair shot at achieving your dreams. That was what I wanted. I wanted to see if I could make something out of this desire to be involved in healthcare without being like a doctor or a clinician. Um, I was really lucky because I ended up in Boston, which is the global, like some of the most cutting edge research in healthcare and medicine is happening in Boston. And there's a
Mm,
large biotech industry, which I knew nothing about. But I ended up with a job as a part-time data analyst. And I eventually worked my way up. And this was in a hospital, a teaching hospital, where I got to work with patients of all different backgrounds. I loved it so much that I worked up into a research assistant role and then a research coordinator role. And I learned a lot from the ground up about what it takes to run a clinic, what it takes to run research in clinical settings. I got to see firsthand how research can impact and improve patients' lives. But there was one problem. I was burnt out. I was
oh,
so burnt out. I loved the patients. I loved interacting with them, but I had to reduce my schedule to part-time because I was just on that verge of burnout and I didn't know what to do with my life. Because everyone around me was saying, "Oh, you should go and get a PhD. If you don't want to become a doctor, go get like a PhD in psychology because you're so good with patients."
mm-hmm,
And I didn't want to do it because I knew it wasn't for me.
mm-hmm,
Really liked math and business
mm-hmm,
and policy. I also didn't know what to do because when you move to a new country, there are kind of two paths that are laid ahead of you, right? That everyone
mm-hmm,
says to you, this is the way to go. One is the traditional path of being a professional engineer, doctor, or lawyer, right? I
mm-hmm.
think a lot of listeners can relate to this. You get one of those professions, you are guaranteed a job, you earn enough money to buy a house and have a
Yes.
family and maybe a car and enough left over to take a 2 week long vacation every year.
Yeah.
But I didn't want that. And I also didn't want the PhD route, which is the second one that a lot of us come to the US who are pursuing excellence. Many people come here to pursue excellence
Mm-hmm,
in academia. And I also knew academia was not for me.
mm-hmm,
So I took a risk. I applied to a bunch of graduate school programs that would lead to a PhD, but
mm-hmm,
during a crazy moment
mm-hmm.
that involved me being in the countryside in Chile with dial-up internet,
Oh,
I decided to submit an application to Columbia University for an MPH degree. Even though everyone around me had said, don't do it, you'll go into debt. An MPH, it's only going to lead to a low-paying job. You're better off going to medical school or getting a
mm,
PhD in a different area. I said, let me just see what happens if I submit that application. And I came back and I forgot about it to the US. I was on vacation there. And about 4 months later, I get this email that says, "Hey, congratulations, you've been accepted to Columbia
oh my
University."
God. Oh my God. Yes.
And I was sitting in a hospital and I started crying because I thought, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." It was like the bad boy knocking on your door that you
Mm-hmm,
always wanted to run away with.
mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if I was doing the right thing by saying yes, but after a lot of back and forth and indecision, I decided that I would take my chances
Okay.
and just go and see what would happen. And from there on, I got exposed to the world of healthcare consulting through professors and coworkers, colleagues, not coworkers. And I got to do a practicum experience. I got to do an internship experience that exposed me what to all that. And I got a feel for what it would be like to work in that field. And I just fell in love with it. I knew that was where I wanted to go. So after I graduated, I pursued, I searched for jobs for 6 months. I was unemployed in New York for 6 months, which is not a
Mm-hmm,
good city to be unemployed.
mm-hmm.
And I think at one point I was jumping turnstiles because I couldn't afford subway fare. And I thought, oh my God, it's either I get a job offer next few weeks or I may need to go back to Portugal to be with my family. And at the last minute, at the 11th hour, I got a call from a British number. And I thought, who's calling me from England?
Uh-huh.
It turned out that I had applied for a economist position at a company with an office in New York City. They really liked my profile and they wanted to know if I would come in for an interview, and I did. So from there, the rest is history. I got into health economics. I fell in love with the idea of using health economics research to guide policy and decision making for the coverage of therapies and medical devices. From there, I went into strategy consulting at a prestigious firm, and I had made it. I
So good.
I felt like I had made the immigrant
Oh my God.
dream,
Yes.
right? Like I was in this consulting firm earning a high six-figure salary, which is what we all want when we move to a different country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, my family was like, okay, your time at Columbia and all this debt, it paid off.
Mm-hmm.
I was still publishing research papers, even though I wasn't doing a PhD. And best of all, I had a boyfriend, which at the age of 35, my family was very excited about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And even better, I had my grandmother still alive, and she was just like my best friend.
Mm.
And my journey to get to where I am today, I think came to a turning point. Like that was the climax during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, because three things happened in 1 year that really forced me to think about leadership and how to find success and happiness in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these three things, right? Consulting job, boyfriend, grandma. They sound amazing, right?
Yes.
I was miserable.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, I was miserable because even though the consulting position was prestigious and everything I wanted on paper, it was a toxic environment and it was many hours. I was stressed out.
Okay.
And we had leadership on our team that was very dysfunctional. And so we weren't bringing in business. And I felt like I was going to get laid off because we weren't earning money.
Mm.
And during that time, my grandmother passes away.
Oh, good. Okay. Mm.
And my boyfriend leaves me a few months later because he says, oh, this is too much for me. I'm out. And then my job lays me off.
Oh gosh. It was all in the same year. Look at me, even like all in the
All
same
the same
year.
year, all
Mm.
the same year, and during the pandemic. So you can't like fly to go, you can't like really see people that much, right?
Yeah. Especially in New York City, right? So yeah. Mm.
Especially in New York City. So, as crazy as all that sounds, I really think it was a turning point for me because I was suddenly forced to come to terms with the fact that this idea of success that we are told is the key to a happy life. Get a good job, high paying, buying a all those things. I had to face the fact that this maybe wasn't for me and that I
Mm-hmm.
needed to figure out a more authentic way to live. And at the time, my career was very tied to my identity. And I was free because suddenly I had this freedom to explore what did I really want moving forward. And so I did a lot of soul searching. And the first decision I made was that I really wanted to find a position that had excellent leadership, good culture, and that brought me passion and joy.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, using my consulting and research background, I learned everything I could about leadership. I wanted to, during job interviews, be able to pick out the green and the red flags of my
Yeah.
future potential bosses and teams. I really wanted a team that had good leaders because I wanted to work in a functioning environment and I wanted to be authentic to myself. And I
Mm.
wanted a job that made me excited. Um, and then I realized, I think into this research. So first of all, let me say, I did end up getting this amazing position, which I'm still in today. I'm a director at a health technology company. My bosses have all been amazing mentors. My team is amazing, and they teach me new things every day, and I'm given the space to be an effective leader in a way that's authentic to me and my values
Yeah.
while doing projects and work that I'm passionate about. So that was the immediate outcome of all this. But the second outcome, which I think is more important, is that I realized that these leadership skills that I was researching, they can be applied to your everyday life,
Oh, yeah.
to find happiness and to live life on your own terms. This idea of success that we are sold and that we internalize growing up, especially when you immigrate to a new country, of you need to have a good job, you need to make money, it needs to be traditional, there's this like list, this checklist you have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of freedom in throwing away that checklist and creating your own.
Oh, boy.
And that turning point, that crazy year that I just told you about, I look back on it and I think it was maybe the best thing that happened to me. I mean, not the grandmother dying part, but the rest of it, I think, was a blessing in disguise because it forced me to really examine where I was, what wasn't working, and how to address all of that. Because at the end of the day, we are responsible for how we live our own lives.
Yeah. Oh my God. Ooh, gosh, this is like,
I just gave you a lot.
thank you so much for sharing all this here today in our
Mhm.
work life for badasses, because this is really a badass life. And you say like that year took like a lot, like, so, but I see that's a courageous act of thinking that year that happened everything to you, like in the situation of COVID, like, I think it's something about expanding your emotional capacity, right? So, but I
Yeah.
wanna go because you have so many chapters. You told us like different chapters, and I'm
Mhm.
curious about one thing that you mentioned here, and then perhaps you can unpack some of your journey because the wisdom you have throughout your journey is like massive here. That's what I'm seeing. All right. So, and to unpack the first part is interesting, like back on having a good job and you go to the vacations, like but like you said, like, I want something else. I was burnout, right? So I want something else. But you didn't know what you wanted. But you did know, you mentioned what you didn't want, what I did not want. And that's, I think it's very interesting for someone who wants to build a new chapter, right? So at least kind of like I know what are my no's, but I don't know very well what's the vision, creating the vision look like. So I kind of like go back and like find like if I see a clue of how does it look like. But tell us about that, like because you were explaining it. I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a psychologist. I don't want to be doing the PhD. I like, and you said something. I like policy and math, which I feel it's so cool, right? Somebody is a badass here. Like I like math and policy. Who likes that, right? So like you, like amazing.
Yeah.
So the things you didn't like, you didn't want, drove to the decision. Like I want to see like how you thought and what was your decision process here.
Yeah. I kind of, it's funny you bring this up because I've learned over the years, and what I've started to advocate for is that we place too much emphasis on having the perfect vision and the perfect plan before executing on anything.
Yeah.
I think maybe what's more important is to understand if you don't have that vision, right? Like vision is important, and I think there's a reason why we are told figure out your vision so you can follow it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have that vision, I think it's okay because if you know what your values are, then you can reiterate and figure out what that vision is. So at that time, my thought process was I'm a researcher.
Mm-hmm.
Let me approach this with a scientific mindset because I have no idea what's going to happen. My hypothesis is that there is a path out there which can embody the things I value the most. And it may not be traditional, but I give myself permission to explore.
Wow. All right, mic drop here. Okay. I can't agree more. This is really like, wow, but you executed. Okay, so, but let's see. What you just said is what we hear out there as a big lesson, even in leadership, right? So not only in leadership, but in personal development, in personal growth, in reinvention. So we hear a lot, but you executed. You dare to execute it. Was something else that you hold on to make that decision? Because it was not easy, right? So it was not that easy
Oh
decision.
no, it was
I get like from what you told, like, oh boy, like, right? So tell us more about like if it was something, right? So that I made a decision and it helped me something so we can help also someone else that is crossroads and want to make a decision and can be inspired by you.
so I do want to clarify. It was tough executing on that in the
Okay.
beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I was I two things happened for me to execute. Because I didn't exactly execute out of my own free will. I executed by creating a situation where I was forced to make decisions. So I resigned from my
Okay.
job. And I resigned knowing that if I didn't take this path to go to New York City, that I would be unemployed in Boston in an even worse position. So I kind of blew my life up a little bit because I didn't know how to execute confidently. So I created like an exit path for me to go down to New York City. So I was forced to go because by that
Okay.
point I had I had an offer for a PhD program in London. I had rescinded that offer. So by that point, I was left with just Columbia. So that was the first thing. Like I knew I needed to execute and I just didn't know how. Um,
Hmm.
the second thing that did help me was once I found the right people to show me the way, and that told me it was okay to execute and that it was okay to execute even though I was feeling scared and uncertain. Once I found the right people, it became much, much easier. So the first step was blowing up my life a little bit because
Yeah,
I knew
like
that,
burning the bridges, I always say, right? So,
yeah, I burned the bridges because I did have some family in Boston. I was living a very stable, comfortable life. I was living with my brother and one of my best friends. Like I loved living in Boston, but I knew that I needed a push and that no one was going to do it except for me. So by blowing it up, that was my response to knowing that I had to go to point B, but not knowing how to do it exactly. And then
okay.
once I got to New York City, I had a couple of professors and I made a couple of friends who just saw what I did and were like, it's okay to want to take an untraditional path.
Mm.
And I decided that I was going to let them mentor and guide me because they were where I wanted to be. And I think the best way to collapse a timeline to achieve the success that you want is to learn from people who have already done it because we
Hmm.
are all very social creatures and we want acceptance from the people around us. And the people around us are often, and these are often the people who love us the most, who will
Yes.
say, oh,
Yes.
don't do that, because they are thinking, not maliciously at all. I think they
No.
just want to
Yeah.
protect us with what they think will they just want us to be happy. So that's where they're coming from. And I knew that I needed to find people who were not emotionally invested in me in that level of intensity and who were already where I was and who could kind of show me the way. And so
Hmm.
That's really my secret is relationships. Please don't blow up anyone who listens to this. Please don't blow up your life. I was 24, sorry, I was 30 and I didn't know what I was doing. Um, but having a network of people and cultivating that network with intention is really my secret for getting anywhere and for pivoting to almost anything.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, no, it's absolutely so important to have the right people surround you, right? To support the journey that others, like so many times close to us, are the ones who actually hold us back the most, right? So, and that to say is like so understandable, so understandable. But
Yeah.
great, courageous, like there was a courageous moment there, right? So, okay, all right. Even with Certi, like, okay, Certi, like, okay, come on. It's a courageous act of burning the bridges, like you say. And, now you kind of, okay, now I have a way to go. I need to find out the way to go to point B because I already burned the bridges. There's no other way back. So that's a way to do it as well. So, and I'm curious about like the other part that you said, and I thought TV was very interesting as well for our listeners, and like the badass life and the belief that in yourself that you have your own back and live life on your own terms. Looking back to that year, the COVID, that the three things happened, right? So, like your
Mhm.
job, your boyfriend, and your grandma, right? So it was and COVID, right? So there's
Yeah.
a fourth thing. So it's like I
Yeah.
would say four, COVID in New York City, five. So all that happened, you say like then that you strengthened so much, right? So you grew so much. Um, that in our world, right, we call expanding your capacity. But I wanna understand from you from that point. So how much that you use, right, that expansion brought you forward, right? So like that
Yeah.
you were aware of.
So it's a really good question because deep down with my job and my relationship, I knew I was unhappy and I knew that it wasn't a good fit for me. And I stubbornly kept holding on because I told myself successful people don't quit. I need to be gritty. I need to be persistent. I need to just keep going and things will turn around. And life has a funny way of of ejecting you from situations that don't serve you. Because neither of those situations were serving me,
Okay.
right? So I was able to expand my capacity from that point on, I think mostly because I had a sense of internal peace and I listened to that. I think every single
Okay.
one of us has an intuition, a voice that tells us what to do. That is like our authentic inner voice ourselves. And that voice was telling me, hey, this sucks, but it's okay because what's next is going to be even more exciting. And I chose in that moment, and this was actually New Year's Eve. I was in Mexico with friends celebrating the new year, and my friends were very supportive and very positive. And it was kind of in talking to them in that beautiful setting, sort of away from New York City, I was able to get some moments of clarity where I realized that things could go wrong, but what if they went right? And why
Mm.
not me? And that simple little reframing, I think, propelled things forward and it gave me the strength to take the decisions I needed to take to
Mhm.
keep expanding that capacity. So, what do I mean by decisions and actions? I returned to New York after the New Year. So I was laid off a few weeks before Christmas and
Oh
I
gosh.
returned to New York. And I returned to New York a few weeks later. And I phoned up recruiters and I reached out to my network and I said, hey, this happened. This is what I'm interested in. Do you have anything for me? Any opportunities? And the quality of the opportunities that came my way once I started focusing only on the things that interested me and that were aligned with my core values and vision, those opportunities became so exciting that I became excited about the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of expanding capacity, I think it's not something that you sit down and say to yourself, I'm going to expand my capacity.
No, I know.
I
That's why
really
I'm
don't
like,
think, yeah.
me neither. That's why I was curious, like how, because you use that expansion, like, because I know parts of forward, right? So in the forward, I can see how you use it. So like, are you aware of like, it's true. I don't think we got,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to expand. But now that we know and grow and be aware, I think we do. I think we more and more do. I mean, this messy middle, I acknowledge this is messy middle. I
Yes.
understand that I'm here, so I'm expanding. So I think we do now, like, but we need to have a certain level of maturity already, right? So yeah, so that's why it was very interesting, like to understand where you use that expansion for your achievements, like further, because you had so many.
Yeah, I think having self-awareness is important. Harvard Business School has a lot of really interesting research around leadership qualities and self-awareness. Turns out that the most effective leaders, whether it's leading a team or a company or even just themselves, are also the ones that have self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And by that point, I think I was self-aware enough to, or at least willing to be self-aware enough to acknowledge that this was the messy middle and that it would pass. And it was only really when I came out the other side that I looked back and like evaluated, looked at the data, so to speak, right? So, what was my capacity back in December? And what is my capacity in the following March? So, I got my job offer. I started my new job March of 23, and I was laid off December 22. And I compared the data points between those two situations and realized, oh, my capacity expanded.
Okay. I love data
Yeah.
points. Okay, good.
Yeah. We love a good data set here.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. But like I think you just mentioned something that I'd like to ask you as a segue, as a
Yeah, of
question,
course.
which is about your role as a thought leader, right? So in terms of you build like a very interesting, like and popular TikTok account. You have an Instagram and you have a Substack newsletter where you're challenging outdated leadership norms. Can you elaborate what's the role of being a thought leader, especially in these spaces? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it back to the healthcare context where you, in order to succeed in healthcare, you need to be collaborative. You need to have empathy because, your ultimate goal is to help patients, and that empathy serves to help you get there. And you need to have good flexibility in thinking because healthcare is incredibly multidisciplinary.
Mhm.
And so you need to be adaptable. And those three things run counter to how leadership is traditionally perceived. So I think a lot of people, when they hear the word leadership, they think like authoritative, um, top of a hierarchy, someone who has tunnel vision, um, someone who is like aggressive and tough. So, kind of like the Elon Musks and Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? But the funny thing about that type of leadership is that there's a lot of data and evidence and research that shows that that is not the most effective way to lead, and that you need to have the elements of empathy, of adaptability, of collaboration to be an effective leader. And in healthcare,
Yeah.
that's just like inherent to a lot of things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those principles, like that paradigm, is something that's not spoken about enough. And
Okay.
I wanted to sort of break that myth using my platform, particularly for women of immigrant backgrounds out there who shockingly, and I don't know if this is your experience, I don't know if this is your experience, Anna, but many times I will speak to brilliant women who are pioneers and who I view as being incredibly effective leaders and very competent and good at what they do. They will say to me, "Oh, I'm not a leader." Like they're hesitant
Yeah.
to put
Yeah.
themselves in that light. And this to me is very interesting and a little bit heartbreaking, right? Because we live in a society today where the majority of people view men and women as equally effective, equally competent in leadership roles. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are situations where that's not the case, but I think, it's definitely better than what it used to be. And yet, women are more likely to undervalue themselves. And
Yeah.
in healthcare, in the world of health tech and healthcare, you want as many different types of perspectives to be included in the decision making
Mm-hmm.
because that leads to better patient outcomes, it leads to better business, it leads to more effective work processes. And evidence out there for this is just overwhelming. And you need diversity in perspectives because everyone has something different to bring to the table, and together you can make a better product or idea or service than if you're just alone. So I want to really make it loud and clear for women of immigrant backgrounds that your you matter in this conversation. Your perspective matters, and you are more competent than you give yourself credit for. And
Mm-hmm.
um, And I think it helps to have other people like us up there saying this message because role models and mentors are so important today.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. And it's important. I agree. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for having this role. All right. So I think it's so good to hear from you, like your videos and your opinions, your perspectives. So good.
Thank you.
So I'm curious also. So as we're talking about achievements and leadership and from your side, I'm very curious, like, to hear from you. What's the most badass thing that you've done in the past year or so? Okay. Can you walk us through the decision making and process behind it?
Yeah, I started writing a book.
Wow, yes. Good.
And I signed with a publishing company about a
Amazing.
month ago. Um,
Amazing. This is to celebrate. Okay. This is amazing. All right. Oh my, so good.
yeah.
Do you have the date to release?
Not yet,
Not
no.
yet. Okay.
Still work in progress. But I will say this, I've wanted to be a published author since I was a little girl,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really thought I had anything meaningful to say until I realized that this thing called imposter syndrome exists and that maybe listening to every single one of our thoughts isn't the way to live a life, a good life. Um, so about a year ago, I started jotting down ideas for this book, synthesizing everything I've learned about like leadership and what it means to develop leadership skills, based off of those experiences. And even though I didn't have a finished first draft, I still decided to phone publishing companies to say, hey, here's my proposal, here's my idea, here's my credentials. What do you think? Do you think it's possible for me to work with an editor to, create a polished draft and, continue refining it until it's ready for publication? And I found a publisher that would take me on, and it was a little bit crazy because I thought I had to have a perfect manuscript, but it turns out in nonfiction that's not the case. And it was a big risk, right? Because now I'm committed.
Oh
And
my God, that's so good. This is so good. You did the unconventional thing, right? So you look after the editors, right? The publishers, and like you got this, like so good. That's a badass thing. I don't know if it's that the most badass than publishing really the book, but the fact that you just believe and do the action of calling and look after for a publishing house, that's outstanding.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Yeah, I think taking action is so important. I think a lot of us are held back by the invisible scripts that we have in our minds. We internalize a lot growing up, right? Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's why we are talking about this. So to normalize those actions, and it's okay. Because let me just ask you, like, from you got a yes, now you are committed with the publishing house,
mhm.
but you got no's.
Oh, I got no's like you wouldn't believe. I've been rejected so many times in my life, but I think we're not taught that getting a no doesn't have to be the final decision.
Yes. And
And
that's always
yeah.
like the what holds us back, the fear of rejection. So I don't do it. So, but here, like calling, I'm not sure you perhaps email, right? So whatever it is, the communication to the publishing house, getting through the request. You got yeses. No, you got one yes, but you got a bunch of no's as well.
Oh
But the
yeah.
yes, but we're talking about here the yes and congratulations and doing really big celebration because you're gonna get your book published by a publishing house, right? But the no's underneath, the no's that how many no's I got to get one yes, that's what it matters like to take action. And I want everybody to listen to this from Catarina that she did it. All right. So it's a big, big lesson.
The no's, they can help you in the end, which is something I'm learning right now through my job, my day job. Because frequently, we try to get business. We're a vendor. We're a research consulting vendor to life science and biotech companies. And in the business development, once you get involved in that, you start to get very used to hearing no. And at first it hurts, right? You're like,
Of
oh
course.
man, like what did I do wrong? But then you realize that 9 times out of 10, when you get a no, it doesn't really have that much to do with you. And it doesn't mean you should stop. It actually means to keep going until you find someone that sees you as a good fit because they will be a good fit for you.
Amazing. I agree. All right, so I'm going here for the final question. All right.
Yeah.
Um, so I would like to learn from you. So from badass to badass, right? So here the badass, like work life for badass is here, like the podcast. What would be the advice would you give to our listeners who want to feel empowered and confident in their lives?
Ooh, I love this one. I would say your story is your message. And let me clarify this. We often, we as people, and I think especially if you're living in a different country, we want to fit in. We're social creatures, right? That's what our
Mm-hmm.
brain's wired for. That's what we want. So I think people tend to discount their own stories, which I don't think is the right approach. Because there's so much strength and power in your own story and who you are as a person. One
Yeah,
thing I do appreciate a lot about American culture is that there is more of an emphasis on individualism.
yeah.
And I think that diversity and individualism is to be celebrated. And
Mm-hmm.
so your story, the thing that makes you you, that just by itself is a powerful message.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So your story is your golden piece that you're building, right? Whatever it is that you learn, you live. Whew, leverage your story. Good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you are an example of that. But now, before we share where all the listeners can find you, can we do like a rapid fire type of questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
All right, let's go, Catarina. Here we are. So we're gonna start. What
Yes.
is your favorite superhero?
Oh my goodness. Storm from X-Men.
Okay, good. I think it's
Yeah.
the first one I listen is from that one. Good. Favorite place?
The Morningside Parks. Morningside Parks in New York City. It's right next to my house, and I spend a lot of time there in front of a waterfall. It's very
Oh,
peaceful.
favorite music?
Heavy metal.
Seriously, I love that. I love it. I didn't know. Favorite book?
Oh my goodness. I would have to say it's Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which is all about behavioral economics and behavioral science.
I love him.
I refer to it pretty often, and there's just like so much good stuff in there.
It is. I like him as well. Yeah. Favorite dessert?
Chocolate mousse, come on.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, of course. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Substack at Adasia Insights, ADASIA Insights, which not surprisingly, like has the initial acronym of AI. So
Oh, okay. Didn't
you can
know.
find me there, and you can find me on Substack under Catarina Abreu. And drop a follow, drop a comment. I always enjoy talking to people and hearing their stories and seeing if there's any way I can help.
Yes, and be tuned because the book is about to be launched, right?
Hell yeah, it is.
Oh, yes, let's go. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Like,
Thank you.
this conversation, it's outstanding. So thank you. Thank you so much. And all the contacts will be on the show notes. So everybody can go to the show notes and follow Catarina and connect with her. So, and yeah, we're all looking forward for the book. Okay. So thank you, Catarina. All right.
And thank
So,
you, Anna, for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I
yes.
I feel like I learn something new every time I speak with you, and this has been such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you. So, to all listeners here, thank you for tuning in to AnnaJo Talks Work Life for Badasses. I hope today's episode has inspired you to live life on your own terms. Until next time, remember you are powerful, you are capable, and you can do hard things. See ya.
Looking to find harmony and work-life balance? Join Coach AnnaJo as she shares practical strategies, empowering mindsets, and inspiring stories to live the life you want to lead on AnnaJo Talks, Work Life for Balance.